So here's a question. In an era of school shootings, how should we be thinking about kids and toy guns?
We are a Nerf gun facility in Denton, Texas. You can't even hardly talk to these kids when they come in because they're so amped. They come in and they see all the guns and the equipment and they're just, it's like they've been on Red Bull for a week. We'll see 600 people a weekend. On a busy weekend, it can be 1,000 to 1,200 people.
Todd talks about his Nerf guns like they're a kind of public service. They get kids away from their screens, get them moving around in the real world.
They get out there, they're battling it out. They want to know who won and lost. They're serious.
Some parents haven't taken to gunplay in quite the same way, and have even taken initiatives to stop it.
Goodies Not Guns is basically a movement that we started to try to encourage kids to wear nonviolent Halloween costumes. And it started because last year, right before Halloween, there was the big shooting in Vegas.
The idea of Goodies Not Guns is just here's one opportunity to have your kids not play with weapons.
Most people in the community were supportive or indifferent.
I would say about 10% of our friends and neighbors were pretty annoyed about it. They don't agree. They don't want to be told what to do with their guns, toy or real. And also it was really emotionally taxing on us. People were really kind of hostile.
Eventually, things got overwhelming, and Amanda and Jordan stopped working on the project.
If you guys are getting water, make sure you...
Concerns about the impact and ethics of toy guns aren't new. Here, we found these old NBC reports from the 1980s.
Let's talk about some toys that could cause you to be killed. That's right, killed.
But today, real fears about school shootings in America have collided with a larger conversation about boys and how they understand masculinity and aggression. And that's led to a kind of renewed moral panic about toy guns. Last summer, the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton, was criticized on the internet for letting Prince George play with a toy gun during a polo match. David and Victoria Beckham were also slammed for British Vogue photographs showing their kids holding water guns.
There have been studies conducted in the lab. Kids who are randomly assigned to play with toy guns are more likely to engage in aggressive acts, real-world aggressive acts later.
The existing data isn't great. That's because these studies are often small and rarely long-term. Some studies show that there isn't an effect at all. Still, she believes the data points in one direction.
The short answer is that it's probably not a great idea to let your kids play with toy guns.
Play with guns is not dangerous and may even be necessarily helpful.
A decade ago, Professor Meschling wrote about toy guns in the Journal of Play.
And the argument is essentially that boys and girls who play with guns too really do understand the difference between fantasy and reality.
He even thinks that toy guns can be helpful.
They shoot, maybe some kid pretends to die. Playing with death and thinking about death in children is not something that adults like to contemplate, but it actually is part of the healthy psychology of human beings.
Toy guns are as much a part of the American story as real guns, but it wasn't until the early 20th century that toy guns started being marketed more aggressively, as a way for boys to bond with their fathers and learn about military history. Still, toy guns didn't really take off until the 1940s. After World War II, there was a hot market for pretend Tommy submachine guns, the kind that real soldiers had used overseas. But then the 60s happened. There were protests against the carnage of the Vietnam War. There were crackdowns on civil rights protests. Some department stores stopped advertising toy guns for a while. By the 1980s, there was a new problem. Incidents of police officers mistaking toy guns for the real deal and shooting and killing children. In 1989, a new federal law required manufacturers to put an orange strip at the end of the toy gun barrel to identify them as fakes. But critics say the orange strips aren't enough because there are still shootings, and when they happen, it seems to be children of color who end up dead at the hands of police. Like Tamir Rice in 2014 and Tyre King in 2015. Still, Professor Meschling thinks that banning toy guns is not the answer.
Banning gunplay does not work. Guns are a part of our culture. Guns permeate the popular culture that they see in television and now in video games.
Is it the end of the world if, your child plays with a toy gun once? No.
Dr. Martell thinks it's probably good to monitor whether a child takes things too far, builds up an arsenal of toy weapons, and refuses to play with anything else. She says it's wise to focus not just on the toy, but how it's used.
Did I get you?